Are you a leader, manager, entrepreneur, business owner, or knowledge worker? Are you leading people or wondering how to be a better leader in your own life and work? If you are, then you can be experimenting better. Welcome to The Experimental Leader, a podcast that takes a look at the ways leaders are experimenting in their own work. Hosted by Melanie Parrish, we dive into real-life conversations about how people might be using a scientist's mindset and experimenting in their work. Shift your leadership into something that works better. Join us on The Experimental Leader today.
Hi there. It's so great to be with you live today. I've been thinking about leadership, and I've been thinking about, curating our own experience, both as humans and as leaders. And as leaders, it also sort of translates to curating the experience of our direct reports. So I know that when I book a trip or do something for myself, I get really hungry for the best experience. I'm getting on a plane and going to New York this weekend. I managed to get Hamilton tickets right when Broadway opened, so I'm pretty excited about that. And we're going to go to Aquavit and the restaurant there. And then I wanted to sort of curate some spaces. I'm going with my husband, and I just really wanted to have some spaces where we could wander, we could think, we could talk, we could go to the bar downstairs. I wanted a world of infinite possibilities. And so I've been thinking about that. And I've also been thinking about, this is the first trip we've taken together as a couple just for fun since January of 2020. So it's been a really long time. And so, I think about where I'm thrifty and where I'm not. And I just decided, well, we're checking bags because that makes it easier. And then what will we do? How will we get to the airport? All of those little parts of it. But this translates to leadership because we're always curating the experience of the people below us. What do we want it to feel like to work for us? And I think about, it's a tough market right now for employers. There's employee shortages, there's people looking for new jobs. I just read a statistic that said that 70% of people believe they're underpaid right now. And that's exactly what I'm hearing from my one-on-one clients right now. They feel like they're underpaid, which I think is really interesting. And so in this market, one thing that we can do as leaders is to curate a positive work environment. And the same things I think about on my trip about how I want it to feel apply to how, we take a minute to talk to somebody at work. It isn't just tactical or super gritty every time we get together. I am really conscious of saying to my team members, how are you? How's your family? What's going on in your life? And they want the opportunity to share those things. And it's super important because I want the people that work with me to feel great about the work that they do. I also want them to have as much responsibility as they possibly can. That's part of curating their experience. So I just thought it was fun going into the holidays just to think about how we curate our own experiences. And then I just want to challenge you to think about how you're curating the experience of those in your organization. And I'm super excited about our guest today. His name is Mark Sherkey, and he's a retired U.S. Army colonel, and he's currently serving in Johnson & Johnson's Experienced Military Veteran Leadership Development Program. And so this is the coolest program. So they bring in people who are really good leaders in one context, and then they put them into different contexts within J&J, and they help them develop as leaders in the corporate world. And I'm not going to go into all the areas that he's done, but he has his last role that he did was the director for global commercial strategy. So I want to talk to him a little bit about strategy today. And Mark, it is so great to have you on my show.
Thanks, Melanie. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, it's great to have you. I think we met on LinkedIn, and I just thought you were so interesting that I wanted to invite you to be here on my podcast. And we just really had a chat. There was no purpose to it. It was really just talking. And I guess that's a shout out to anybody who wants to reach out to have a chat with me. You might end up on my podcast, but more than that, we might, learn something about each other. And I'm always up for those kinds of connections. I would love to just dive in, Mark. What have you been up to with work and with leadership? Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Thank you for asking that, Melanie. So you mentioned previously that I'm a part of what they call the EMVLDP program. Think of that as the older people with the gray hair that have served in the military, kind of 20 plus years retired officers, non-commissioned officers. We go through an interview process, and it's right now they're taking basically about 4 per cohort. We've already, I was in the first cohort and the first one going through this program, and then there's another cohort behind us, and another cohort will come later. And so what they do, which I think is just phenomenal, is they place each of us based off of our own skill set and talents into different areas of the business. Whether in this case, I am on the Janssen pharmaceutical side, where someone else could be on potentially in another area where it could be consumer or it could be medical device. And we're all put into different leadership roles. And it's more of a constantly learning and getting more familiar with their language, but still seeing the similarities between our previous roles. And so we can kind of understand where they are in that building out of a strategy.
Well, and I'm super curious when I hear about this program. How has it been for you? How's it working?
So let me tell you a little bit more about the program. It is for the EMVLDP folks. We have 2 9 to 12 month rotations. Again, different parts of the company. And after the second to maybe a little mini third rotation, then at that point, we're going to try to land, enroll inside the company. And so this is kind of we'll call it somewhat of a long lead time to come in to be a part of the J&J's culture, live by the credo, and at the same time be able to get the necessary skill sets within our kit bag at that point, and then continue on to serve and apply our leadership styles and methodology to their problem sets.
Well, I think this is fascinating because we're talking about long-term strategy, and a 2-year training program or a 2 years, introduction period is certainly a long-term strategy in terms of onboarding someone. What do you think J&J gets while you're in that 2-year program?
Well, I think what they saw was that there was a gap, and also I think they saw that there was a tremendous opportunity / pipeline into the company if they actually looked at senior military folks. Because I know a lot of other companies, and I've been one to try to help stand up a lot of different programs with other companies in the past. They're more tailored to more of the junior ranks coming in, and then they want you to start at the bottom and move all the way up, which makes sense for some companies. J&J took a kind of a different approach. They also do the junior level too, so this is the first time they're doing now more at a senior level. And what they get is someone that has 20, 25 plus years of leadership experience in all kinds of different environments and settings. Knows how to manage time, knows how to manage policy, write strategy, lead and train others. And truly, senior leaders of all services, we know how to manage talent and mitigate risk. And so those two key things, I think, is why they're bringing us into the company.
And how do you find, it's a huge investment in you. I just had a question that popped into my head, which was, how are you received by other people at J&J who don't get that kind of investment?
Well, the beauty of J&J is they have a lot of what we'll call LDPs, leadership development programs, and EMVLDP is just another LDP program. It's certainly unique, but all LDP programs are unique. So we don't try to Uh, we're very humble. We're very excited to be a part of their team. But it I think they're used to having different LDPs, so it's not so much of a shift in mindset or like, who are you and how did you get here? Though, when people ask me my journey is kind of a little not the anomaly, and so they think it's kind of cool, and they're excited to see what I can bring to them.
I think it's kind of cool too. And I have to chuckle. I did some work in J&J a few years ago, and I have to chuckle at the acronyms. Like
Ugh.
nobody does acronyms better than J&J.
Oh my gosh,
Uh,
that is one of the hardest parts of our transition. Is it's the first meeting I sat in. I think one person used 7 acronyms in one sentence, and I just raised my hand and said, "I have no idea what you just said." And so they were kind enough to tell me what they said, but from that point on, I kind of got myself a little coach that kind of helped me through the acronym process. And every time you move to another rotation, it's more acronyms, and sometimes the acronyms look the same as the previous, but they're different. It is definitely a new language.
yeah, I know that language. I'm curious what you've noticed as you're skilling up within an organization. You already had a lot of skills. I'm sort of interested in the pedagogy of all this. Like, what did you know you knew? What did you not know that you didn't know?
Hmm.
What's all of that? What did you learn in this process?
Well, when I talk to a lot of transitioning service members and I try to help them as they go through their transition process, since I'm already on the other side of the curtain,
Mhm.
and it's scary going through transition. Um, but what I have been able to do in the very most simplest terms is kind of divide everything into kind of 3 groups, which are exactly the same from my previous environment, the military, to a J&J environment. The first category is about people. And no matter where you are, you're going to be about influencing people, you're going to be about potentially leading people, but ultimately you got to communicate with people. The second is process. And so the military has our military decision making process. We have our processes for supply chain or for whatever different types of things we're going to do. Well, J&J has their process. And so what we try to do is use J&J words into their process, but we understand and map it in our head is from our previous roles. And then the third is delivery. So it's people, process, delivery. And the delivery aspects from the military, you could see us deliver humanitarian aid to certain parts of the world. You could also see us delivering unique type of capabilities, sometimes lethal, sometimes non-lethal. But ultimately, we were delivering some sort of resource or capability to change conditions and environment. And what I see at J&J is specifically on this product that we're working on now, there is a delivery of either goods, drugs, cell therapies into the market. And where in the past I may have been trying to go after terrorists, our terrorist here is cancer. And so we are trying to apply these types of things into a cancer role, at least in the area that I'm working.
I think that's really interesting. I want to shift gears for just a minute. And your last role was in long term strategy. I think it's in our title today that we wanted to talk about experimenting with long term strategy. I think strategy is something that you did a lot of in your military career as well. I'm not even sure exactly the right question to ask you, Mark, and I think that was pretty much my job today. But I
I
guess,
can help you.
yeah, what should I be asking you about long term strategy and how it applies to leadership?
Well, I think that's the perfect question. I think uh, a lot of people get confused between strategy and plans. Strategy I see as like an overarching framework that may be,
Yeah.
we'll call it longer in duration than a plan. Some people I've seen it written, 5 years plus is strategy and less than that's plans. But I mean, that's not kind of how I look at it. Uh, Here at J&J, I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 years on the left side before they even get their product approved from the FDA. And then there is the strategy post that to actually launch it into different communities, whether global or right domestically. In the military, and both of these, I believe there's an art and a science to this. Uh, the art is understanding how to describe and explain to senior leaders as to the complexities of the environment you're working in, because there's a lot of tensions, there's a lot of things moving, not everything's stable. So writing something, normally as soon as you write it, it's obsolete because the environment has changed. The way we have to write in long-term strategy for senior leaders is really being able to help them understand kind of what the root cause is based off of the research we've done, and at the same time be able to come up with good assumptions, as well as just tell the senior or the strategic sponsor, these are the unknowns that we still do not know, but there are ways that we can get after to make those unknowns known. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is provide senior leaders with plausible options, not putting them in a box, but trying to describe and explain through a hypothesis as to where we think we are in time, how long we think it'll take before we can actually do something positive or do something to counter a competitor's type of an advantage. And at the same time, at what points in time would that strategic leader need to commit resources? And so that's one of the first questions senior leaders always want is, when do I have to make a decision? When do I have to commit something? And how much do I have to commit when I do it? And so thinking that way, we're trying to provide them what I would call a light and a heavy touch. And that could be, again, all peaceful, or it could be looking at a competitive environment where there's already multiple drugs or gene cell therapies in the market. And now you're getting ready to be second or third into the market. So not everybody's probably going to want you there. So therefore, what is the communication to external stakeholders? What is the communication internally? What types of marketing campaigns? How do we gain market access? How are our supply chains set? At what point will we outrun our supply lines? All of these different things, so that we can kind of be able to describe and explain that to a senior leader, to where they can then visualize the environment they're operating in, or come back and tell us, I understand that's what you think we're operating in, but there's some other things here you've left out. And then that is a dialogue between us, so that the planners can go back and plan and keep us moving. Because a plan is always in draft. A strategy is always in draft. You're constantly updating it based off of the new information you find.
I love this idea of when do you have to commit resources, because it kind of is an idea until that moment. That's the decision point for leaders is, okay, yeah, we're gonna, and there's a feeling of leaping. I see it in contracts I write and things like that. There's somebody can know they're gonna hire me, and things will sit on their desk until that moment that they leap, because as soon as they leap, there's a commitment of resources. And I think that's true, that there's an edge to that commitment of resources for leaders.
The key for the planner or the strategist to the strategic sponsor, which could be a senior director, could be a vice president, it could be a commanding general. But the ultimate thing is how far in advance will we know that we have to commit resources then, or change direction? And so those early warnings in the military, we would call trip flares. I mean, just as to, okay, we now know something has entered our space and is going to do something. Or here in a business setting, we know that all of a sudden someone just received their FDA approval, and now they're in a market faster than we thought they would be. So we kind of have to use the market access lane to be able to, what we would call the intelligence field in the military, to be able to kind of understand what is happening around us and what are we actually doing at the same time, and does one gain an advantage over the other?
Well, and I'll just say here, from a coach perspective, I watch people come up against these times when they have to commit resources. And if you're actually looking to increase your impact, if you can study this reaction in yourself to slow down when you have to commit resources, like if you can overcome your fear in that one area, you can actually move many things forward more quickly and increase your own impact. Now, that means you have access to the resources, and a zero-sum game with resources is often a different problem.
I mean, you can think of FEMA planning when a natural disaster happens. And, when you hear that the president has signed a certain bill that allows, or emergency declaration that allows FEMA to move resources forward before the event has already occurred.
Right.
And it's the same kind of mentality for us, both here in pharma as well as in the military. It's
and
just a different type of resource.
It's true for every entrepreneur, anybody who manages a budget, that there's that moment in time where you have to commit resources, and who you are, you define who you are as a leader in how you approach that moment.
And the key to that is that being able to have time to build these plans outside of an actual, let's say, crisis situation or an event, gives you time to think through this more in rational terms, and at the same time be able to actually what we would call taking a red team, someone looking at the lens from an opposite view that could then help us make better decisions.
I think that's really cool. Is there any place that people can find you, Mark, if they want to talk about leadership more, or is this something you want? I don't know. I should have asked you this before.
Yeah, my name is on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there. I would be glad to entertain anybody's questions or just have a conversation.
Well, it has been amazing to have you on today. It's been so much fun to talk to you. Thank you so much for your generosity and sharing your journey. Thank
you, Melanie. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. Hope you bring me back sometime.
Yeah, I will. I'd love to hear what happens next in your journey. I'm pretty
Me too.
fascinated by your journey. It's great to have you. Well, I've been talking with Mark Sherkey, and I've loved our conversation. And I love that he differentiated between strategy and plans, because I kind of hate strategic plans. It's like they are out of date the second that you do them, because you've made a plan based on the current condition. But then your plans need to change, because every time you start implementing whatever the plan is, the whole system changes. So in my book, The Experimental Leader, I talk about strategic intents. That's the framework that I like to think of in terms of strategy that will help you have an intent to move forward, an intent about what you want to do, and then you have operational intents to move things like the budgeting process forward. I also would love to give you a free Kata card if you have been reading the book and you want to practice the concepts in The Experimental Leader. And you can just send me an email at melanie@experimentalleader.com, and I will send that out to you. It's been great being with you today. Go experiment.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Experimental Leader. We hope you have found value in today's episode, because we're dedicated to helping you become the experimental leader you want to be. To access the show notes or learn more about working with Melanie, visit melanieparish.com. Go experiment.